Have you ever had like a major project or just a weekend where literally everything that could go wrong did go wrong?
Oh, man.
Right. Like imagine engineering a multi-million dollar machine,
Yeah.
right? And it's designed to do one highly specific thing flawlessly,
Yeah.
only to have your entire weekend completely derailed by a 0.2 of a second delay on a front left wheel nut.
It is brutal. Just completely brutal.
It really is. That is the razor-thin, totally unforgiving margin of Formula One. I mean, you spend months running simulations. You nail your practice sessions.
And the telemetry tells you that you are just untouchable.
Exactly. And then reality steps in and completely rips the script to shreds.
It's a universally humbling experience in top-tier motorsport because at this level of competition, the difference between standing on the top step of the podium and, well, frantically scrambling to stop a strategic bleed, it's measured in fractions of a second.
Right. Yeah.
Fractions that most people wouldn't even perceive.
Which brings us to the core of our deep dive today. We're looking at the 2026 Formula One Hungarian Grand Prix.
Yes.
And specifically, we're looking through the incredibly frustrated lens of Fred Vasseur, the team principal for Ferrari.
Ooh, he was not happy.
Not at all. Based on our source material, which is this really detailed post-race breakdown of Ferrari's dramatic underperformance, he did not pull any punches about where the team failed.
Okay, let's unpack this, because going into this weekend, the paddock consensus was that Ferrari was going to absolutely own the Hungaroring.
They were the undisputed favorites, and understanding why requires looking at the specific track characteristics.
At the layout.
Yeah, because this deep dive isn't just about recounting a bad Sunday.
Yeah.
It is a fascinating case study in how sky-high expectations, minute operational errors, and these massive long-term engineering philosophies, how they all just collide under immense pressure.
So let's talk about that initial expectation first, because looking at the data from Friday practice, it seemed to me that Ferrari had the mechanical grip perfectly dialed in. Oh, absolutely. The setup looked pristine.
Yeah. For a circuit like Hungary, which if you're listening and you don't know, it's a track that demands incredibly high downforce, agility, rear traction.
You don't have those massive sweeping straights where you can just rely on raw straight line speed. It's tight.
Exactly. It's twisty. And their 2026 Challenger looked like it was born to run on this exact layout.
And, I mean, the telemetry backed up the visual tests. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc were flying on Friday.
They really were.
They finished Friday practice sitting comfortably at P1 and P2 on the timing sheets. And when you show that kind of inherent pace on a Friday, the data heavily implies that you have the foundational setup to just, well, control the narrative for the rest of the weekend.
It's kind of like acing a dress rehearsal.
Right.
Or, getting a perfect score on a practice exam, which I think makes the ultimate failure sting even more.
Oh, for sure.
Because that's where the data can be incredibly deceiving. Grip on an empty track on a Friday practice session doesn't automatically translate to navigating duty air and heavy traffic on a Sunday.
Right, because track conditions evolve.
Exactly. You're looking at the screens thinking you have a front row lockout secured. But then a competitor finds a setup breakthrough overnight, and that Friday dominance just evaporates.
And evaporate it did. The stark contrast between Friday's P1 and P2 and the grim reality of Sunday it's honestly jarring.
Yeah, tell me about it.
When the checkered flag finally dropped after 70 grueling laps, Leclerc crossed the line in P4.
Ouch.
And Hamilton trailed right behind him in P5. They entirely missed the podium.
Which is wild for how Friday looked.
Fred Vasseur's quote from our source material really captures the internal frustration perfectly. He stated, and I quote, "When you are P1, P2 on Friday, you expect much more than P4, P5.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear the pain in that statement.
Definitely.
Which leads to the obvious question, right? How does a team go from dominating a session to trailing on Sunday? What is the actual anatomy of a collapse like that?
It's rarely just one thing.
Right, you don't just become an also-ran without a fundamental breakdown in execution.
It was a cascading failure, one compromised decision forcing another. What's fascinating here is how the unraveling began long before the lights went out on Sunday.
It started on Saturday, right?
Yes. Tracing back to a critical failure in Saturday qualifying?
Because they lost pole on Saturday, and it completely broke their Sunday strategy.
Completely.
The source material outlines how McLaren's Lando Norris swooped in to steal pole position. So immediately, Ferrari's expectation of dictating the race pace from the front, it's just gone.
They are instantly on the back foot.
And to make matters worse, Hamilton gets slapped with a 3-place grid penalty for blocking Oscar Piastri.
On a track like the Hungarian, where overtaking is notoriously difficult, losing track position before the race even starts is a massive blow.
A blow that forces a team into desperate strategic gambles, I think.
Oh, 100%. Because of that compromised grid position, Ferrari decided to roll the dice on Sunday.
Right, the tire strategy.
Yeah, while the majority of the sharp end of the grid started on the medium compound tire, Ferrari put both Leclerc, starting P2, and Hamilton down in P5 on the soft tires.
Let's break down the mechanics of that decision for a second, just so everyone listening is on the same page.
Sure.
The whole point of the soft tire in that specific scenario is thermal advantage.
Exactly.
The softer compound reaches its optimal temperature window much faster than the mediums, which gives you maximum traction off the starting line.
They were banking on that launch grip.
Right. To jump Norris and the rest of the pack into turn 1, secure clean air, and then just control the race from the front.
It is an aggressive, high-risk, high-reward play, but, and this is a but the penalty for failure is severe.
Yeah, because if you don't execute those overtakes in the first few corners,
You are trapped in the turbulent wake, the dirty air of the cars ahead. And your tires, which are already designed with a shorter lifespan, they begin to overheat and degrade exponentially faster.
because you're just sliding around in that dirty air.
Exactly.
And their gamble failed right off the line. Leclerc didn't get past Norris,
Go.
and by the end of lap 1, he had actually dropped to 5th place, getting entirely bogged down behind his own teammate, Hamilton.
They torched their opening stint strategy immediately.
Just a total disaster.
And from there, the operational execution continued to splinter. Consider Hamilton's battle with Max Verstappen later in the race.
Right, the undercut attempt.
Yes, Ferrari attempted to use the undercut strategy to gain track position.
And for you listening, the undercut is that classic F1 chess move. You pit earlier than your direct rival, bolt on fresh rubber, and use the massive grip advantage on your outlap to carve chunks of time out of their lead.
Yeah.
So by the time they pit a lap or two later, they emerge from the pit lane behind you.
But it relies entirely on outlap pace and, crucially, flawless execution in the pit box.
Which they didn't have.
Well, Hamilton actually managed the undercut successfully at first, jumping the Red Bull driver after the first round of stocks. But the advantage was squandered almost instantly.
Oh, right. He left the door open.
He left the door open, and Verstappen simply passed him going into turn 1, completely neutralizing the strategic win.
You do all that math on the pit wall to manufacture track position, and then it just evaporates on the asphalt.
It's death by 1,000 cuts.
It really is. But honestly, the stat that jumped out at me the most from Vasseur's breakdown was the pit stops themselves.
Oh, the time loss.
Yes. He highlighted that every single time they boxed, they were losing position by 0.2 or 0.3 seconds.
That metric is a glaring indicator of a systemic issue.
It's massive. When you are trying to execute an undercut, a 0.3-second delay on a wheel gun doesn't just cost you a fraction of a second on the stopwatch. It costs you actual physical track position.
It is the difference between exiting the pit lane in clean air versus slotting right back into the dirty air of a midfield car.
Which ruins your tire management for the entire next stint. It is micro losses compounding into a strategic disaster.
And then you add in Hamilton's late third pit stop.
Yeah.
And a completely unforced 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane.
The entire operation just looked frantic.
It did. And that penalty ultimately locked Hamilton into P5 behind Leclerc, capping off a weekend defined by self-inflicted wounds.
Which brings me to a quote from Vasseur that I really struggle to accept.
Let's hear it.
In reflecting on the weekend, he says, "What we have to improve is execution."
Sure.
Totally agree. But then he immediately follows it up by claiming execution so far has been a good one for us from the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Like looking at the data, how much of this was just a bad weekend versus a symptom of a deeper operational flaw?
It's a fair question.
Right. If your execution has been solid all year, a team of Ferrari's caliber doesn't just spontaneously suffer strategy failures, driver penalties, slow pit stops, and pit lane speeding all at once. It feels like a fundamental breakdown under pressure.
It is a highly scrutinized defense from Vasseur, for sure. When a team operates smoothly for a stretch of races, a sudden convergence of pressure like poor qualifying and panic strategy, it can absolutely trigger a negative operational feedback loop.
Yeah, that makes sense. A snowball effect.
Exactly. However, Vasseur's comments didn't solely rely on defending their human execution. He acutely pointed to a much more rigid, mechanical reality that Ferrari is grappling with.
Here's where it gets really interesting because the source material dives into the actual hardware limitations they are fighting.
Right, moving from the human element to the machine itself.
Vasseur admits that Ferrari has to improve on the engine side, and he uses this specific, highly technical word to describe their problem. He talks about the inertia of engine development.
Using the term inertia in Formula One engineering is a brilliant way to describe the development life cycle.
How so?
Well, in physics, it is a resistance to change in state. In this context, Vasseur is outlining the immense logistical and engineering resistance to altering the engine's core performance mid-season.
Let me reframe this with an analogy for the listener, because I think it helps visualize the massive difference between developing the aerodynamics of the car versus the power unit.
Go for it.
Updating the chassis, like the front wing, the floor edges, the side pods. It's kind of like swapping out the aerodynamic panels on an airplane mid-flight.
It's difficult, but doable.
Exactly. It requires testing, yes, but you can push smaller, constant updates to smooth out the airflow. But the engine's the heart of the machine. The inertia there is massive. If you realize your engine lacks punch, you can't just hot fix it on a Wednesday.
That is an excellent comparison. The lead time required to design an engine modification, manufacture the complex components, validate them on the dynamometer for reliability,
It's exhausting.
and finally integrate them into the chassis without compromising cooling or packaging, it takes months.
Right. If you realize your front wing is inefficient in race 3, you can manufacture a new carbon fiber spec and have it on the car by race 6. But if you realize your engine lacks top-end deployment in race 3, you are largely stuck carrying that deficit for the bulk of the calendar.
Which naturally steers us directly into the broader strategic war happening between the top constructors right now.
The upgrade race.
Exactly. The source material outlines two radically different engineering philosophies going head-to-head under the current cost cap regulations. You have McLaren's approach, and you have Ferrari's approach.
Tell us about the McLaren philosophy first, because it sounds incredibly high stakes.
It really is. According to Vasseur's analysis, McLaren is operating on a consolidated development philosophy.
Meaning they wait.
They are currently waiting to drop one big package, and crucially, Vasseur notes this is likely their final major upgrade of the year.
Wow.
Instead of introducing minor tweaks at every European round, McLaren is hoarding their wind tunnel data, their CFD runs, and their manufacturing budget to unleash one massive technological leap all at once.
So they're essentially enduring whatever pace deficit they have right now, just absorbing the data, knowing they have a massive transformative upgrade sitting in the pipeline.
Correct.
It's a huge risk.
Okay.
Because if the real-world correlation doesn't match their wind tunnel data, their season is effectively over.
It's an all-or-nothing play. But Ferrari is taking the complete opposite route. Vasseur says Ferrari is committed to bringing incremental parts to virtually every race.
So slow drip.
They are opting for the continuous integration model, a modified floor fence one weekend, a slightly reshaped rear wing end plate the next.
Constantly tweaking.
Right. And this raises an important question, and it is a strategic dilemma I want you, the listener, to carefully consider.
Okay, let's hear it.
In a heavily regulated, cost-capped environment like modern Formula One, which philosophy actually dictates long-term success.
Oh, that's tough.
Do you rely on Ferrari's slow drip of continuous improvement, constantly smoothing out the aerodynamic map week by week? Or do you gamble on McLaren's method, risking short-term stagnation for a massive, game-changing payoff?
It is a brilliant question because you see this dynamic everywhere, right? It's how tech giants structure their product launches. It's even how individuals manage their own career growth.
Exactly.
Like, do you want the 1% gain every single day, or do you grind in the shadows for 2 years for one massive promotion?
It's the ultimate debate.
But the reality for Ferrari is that these engineering philosophies aren't just theoretical debates for the factory floor. They have immediate, brutal consequences on the championship standings.
And this requires us to look at the macro environment. Stepping away from the immediate fallout of the Hungarian, we have to contextualize where this leaves the 2026 season as a whole.
Because we are deep into it now.
We are 11 races deep, transitioning directly into the mandatory Formula One summer break.
Which is a critical 2-week period where the factories are literally forced to shut down.
Tools down.
No wind tunnel running, no CFD testing, no manufacturing.
It is a hard pause, and the standings going into this shutdown period are exerting immense psychological pressure on Maranello.
I can only imagine.
Because while Ferrari was busy compromising their own Sunday with failed tire gambles and sluggish pit stops, Mercedes was executing perfectly. Kimi Antonelli, driving for Mercedes, secured third place in Hungary.
He walked away with the exact podium finish that Ferrari's Friday data promised them.
Yes. And the mathematical consequence of Antonelli's consistency is severe.
How severe?
With that podium, he has effectively extended his margin over Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship to a commanding 50 points.
So what does this all mean?
Well,
I mean, a 50-point deficit is the equivalent of 2 entire race victories.
right.
Heading into a mandatory factory shutdown, knowing your on-track execution completely unraveled and your primary rival just stretched their lead by 2 full races.
Right.
How does a team of thousands of engineers mentally recover from that?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer lies entirely in momentum. Vasseur specifically highlighted this in his post-race remark.
What did he say?
He was adamant that despite the operational disaster in Hungary, the underlying data shows Ferrari has steadily closed the raw performance gap to the Silver Arrows over the first half of the season.
Which goes back to their Friday pace. The fundamental mechanical grip is there. The car itself is undeniably getting faster.
But factory momentum is an incredibly fragile asset.
Oh, for sure.
Vasseur's demand that Ferrari must keep this momentum because there's still races to go. It serves as a very deliberate internal rallying cry.
To keep spirits up.
Exactly. By committing to the philosophy of incremental race-by-race upgrades, Ferrari's engineering team cannot afford a mental dip. They have to continue bringing those micro-adjustments, consistently saving hundredths of a second off their lap times, and relentlessly applying pressure to Mercedes.
Which I think is an incredibly relatable dynamic for anyone listening.
Absolutely.
When you are managing a massive long-term project, whether that is navigating a 24-race F1 calendar, or, scaling a startup, or even just pursuing a difficult degree, it demands a ruthless balancing act.
You can't let one bad day sink the ship.
Right. You have to internalize the sting of a major setback, like losing a weekend you were favored to dominate, without letting it derail your relentless pace of daily development. You simply cannot let a disastrous Sunday execution ruin the foundational work you have to do on Monday morning.
And for Ferrari, that Monday morning work is highly specific. It means auditing their pit crew procedures to eradicate those 0.2-second delays.
Getting those pit stops flawless.
Yes. And it means overcoming the massive inertia of their engine development to unlock the straight-line speed they desperately need.
And doing all of that before Antonelli's 50-point lead becomes mathematically insurmountable.
The margins are just wildly unforgiving. It is a massive engineering mountain to climb.
So let's take a breath and recap the journey we've taken through the paddock today. We started with the deceptive telemetry of a flawless Friday practice, breaking down how a track like the Hungarian demands specific mechanical grip that Ferrari clearly possessed.
Yes. And then we traced the cascading operational failures.
From missing out on pole position to the panicked, high-risk soft tire strategy that trapped them in dirty air.
Down to the agonizing micro-losses in the pit lane that ultimately cost them crucial track position.
And then we expanded the lens to examine the fascinating hardware limitations dictating the rest of the season. We explored the high inertia of engine development, right?
Contrasting Ferrari's commitment to slow, continuous aerodynamic updates against McLaren's high-stakes gamble on one final, massive upgrade package.
It sets up an incredibly tense narrative as the 2026 season pauses for the summer break. Ferrari undoubtedly has a fiercely fast car, but they're saddled with a 50-point deficit and a frustrating tendency to compound their own operational mistakes.
Which leaves us with one final critical strategic question to mull over before our next deep dive.
Lay it on us.
We've extensively discussed the rigid inertia of F1 development and how challenging it is to pivot mid-season. Well, if heavily resourced rivals like McLaren are holding their cards, waiting to deploy a massive, wind tunnel-validated upgrade package. What happens if Ferrari's strategy of incremental race-by-race tweaks suddenly hits an aerodynamic ceiling?
Oh, wow.
Will Ferrari's steady trickle of micro-improvements be enough to slowly reel in Antonelli's 50-point lead? Or will they return from the summer break only to find themselves hopelessly outpaced by a rival's sudden, massive technological leap?
That really is the multi-million-dollar question underpinning the entire sport right now. Does the relentless discipline of continuous integration ultimately win out, or does the massive, high-risk architectural overhaul blow the competition off the track.
We'll have to watch and see.
Watching how these engineering philosophies clash on the asphalt is going to be brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. And remember, the next time you have a project where the data says you are perfectly prepared, but reality hits you with a 0.2 of a second delay that unravels everything.
Just think of Fred Vasseur on the pit wall.
Exactly. Internalize the micro loss, audit your execution, and get back to your incremental upgrades on Monday morning. We will catch you next time.